Welcome to another episode of Beyond Risk and Back. Thank you so much for joining me, parents, teachers, and clinicians. Yet another amazing show about parenting kids at high risk coming for you. We're going to talk about coaching. We're going to talk about a hero's journey through this craziness that these families are going to. Moms, dads, if you're listening and you're looking for coaches, I am taking clients right now. You can always reach out to me at aaron@firemountedprograms.com. And for those of you who are here listening to my guest, Jim White, today, who is also a parent coach, I want to thank you for being here because there are families who should be here, could be here, and you are here. That tells me everything I need to know about you as a parent and why people like Jim and I love coaching people like you and love doing this work on these podcasts. So welcome to the show. Listen, like, subscribe, share, and please help me welcome Jim White to the episode. Jim, thanks so much for being here, pal. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Let's jump right in because as we were talking and going through off the air about what we're going to discuss and talking about the hero's journey and that kind of concept, I came up with a question that I told you I wanted to start with. And it's very simply this. In all the families that you've coached, in all of the different scenarios and situations you've been in with families, with parents specifically, what's the golden thread? What's the most common theme you see with everybody you're coaching?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say the most common thread that I've seen within families is as their child moves into that preteen and those teen years, there starts to be I'll call it a conflict or a battle over control. The teen is wanting to exercise more control over their life and sort of take charge of their life, if you will, and the parent resists that. They have trouble turning over that control to the teenager, and that creates a lot of conflict. One of the common things I'll share with parents is this idea of like a readiness gap. And the gap is that the parent tends to underestimate the teen's ability to manage their own life. But on the flip side of that, the teen will tend to overestimate their ability to manage their own life. But that creates the gap, and then trying to close that gap becomes critical because that conflict then breaks down the relationship, which one of the fundamental things I like to work with around parents with is the idea of connection. And when you have that conflict all the time, and there's a lot of arguments and fighting, and there's this control struggle that breaks down that relationship, which in the end makes it more difficult to parent going forward. And the other thing I would throw out with that is sometimes parents have trouble giving up that control because they're not sure what they should be doing as an alternative. And so I like to recommend and talk to them about how do they empower that teenager to be their absolute best. So you let go of the need to control it and you shift your mindset and your direction, if you will, to more of an empowerment mindset, which is it's a different tactic at that point. And the challenge, quite honestly, when you think about when they're young, you do control everything that happens. When a child, especially when they're really young, you decide what they eat, what clothes they wear, what time they go to bed. But then as they grow, there needs to be this natural transition of that control over to the child. And so that's probably one of the most common places or sources of conflict that I see. It's a root cause. And then a lot of things will kind of spring up out of that root cause of that control continuum. And it's different with your child's 13. That's different than when they're 18. But the premise is over that period of time, you turn more and more control over to them. And so that's a common one that I see.
Jim, I'm curious because I know a lot of parents are really struggling with the idea that I've watched my kid make some pretty risky mistakes, some pretty risky choices. And my listeners know why we don't call them bad choices. We call them risky choices. And so the idea of saying, all right, there's this, it's a control struggle. There's a control gap and a control continuum. We're also talking about being asked as parents to relinquish the control to someone who, quite frankly, may have abused it, misused it, misunderstood it, and has caused some damage. How do we even begin the control conversation when our kids have really screwed up self-control?
Right. And I understand your audience is probably at a different place than a lot of parents might be because their child has really pushed that continuum as far as that risky behavior. But ultimately, in order for that child, this is what I would throw out, in order for that child to heal, they have to learn to self manage. And so that's the ultimate goal. And so we have to start moving that direction. And part of the, as you do, I'm sure, part of the coaching process is okay, where are you today in that conversation? And it's not like, okay, how do we move 10 steps forward? It's how do we move one step forward? And so if your particular child, if they're 13, again, the conversation is different than if they're 18. But, if it's a 13-year-old child and they've exhibited some risky behavior, it's okay. What's one step forward I can take in turning over some control and building trust with them and having them start to take some ownership? Because what I've seen happen is when a child starts to be able to make better choices, it's almost like a snowball effect the other way. I mean, if they make bad choices, it can snowball down a bad path. But if they can start to make some good choices and feel good about that and know that they did it with, the parent there in support, it starts to help to reshape their self-image, and they start to have a better image where they're going to make better choices going forward as well. So I think it's just, you got to start where you are and really identify, okay, where am I? What am I comfortable with? And then have that conversation with the child too. What can we work on together to let you have a little bit more control and have you practice? It's a skill when you think about being able to make a responsible choice is a skill that the child needs to be able to develop. And in order to do that, they have to start making choices. But it's a fine line, obviously.
You brought up a concept of this snowball, this control snowball, this choosing snowball. I love it. It makes so much sense to me, and it reminded me of a story. This is one of my daughter's very close friends, and she's a brilliant, brilliant young woman. And during high school and junior high, she was really struggling, and it just kept snowballing. Like the focus was on the struggle, the attention was to the struggle, the energy was around the struggle, and the struggle snowballed. And her parents were finally looking down the path of treatment. And they went up to the girl, they went into the bedroom, and the parents were very clear and very loving. I've known the parents for years and years. I said, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. Something's going to give. Something's going to change. You're either going to treatment or something's going to change in you. But what we know is we're done. We're going to change. We're going to change how we parent. And our first step in changing this is asking what you need from us as we decide what kind of changes. And the girl very eloquently says, I need a do-over. I need a clean slate. Starting right now, I need everything that was yesterday to be left behind, and that you give me one more chance on a clean slate basis to change it myself. And the parent said, done. You have 1 month. And she did it.
Yep, there you go. And the child, when they take ownership of it, that's when they start to feel empowered. And it's interesting, sometimes as parents, and we talked before we started, this idea of a fearful mindset versus a love-based mindset. And when parents parent from that fearful mindset, it tends to be disempowering to the child. And they may not be intending to be disempowering, but it works that way. And so if the parent can make that shift, which it sounds like that's what happened there, is they were willing to forgive. There was forgiveness came in and some compassion for where she was so they could start fresh and clean, which allowed her to start fresh and clean. And then, I always talk to parents, if you're in that love place mindset, one of the questions you ask yourself is, how can I best serve my child right now? What can I do to serve them right now? And sometimes it's just be present and be compassionate and listen and just let the child talk to you without passing judgment or trying to fix a problem or whatever you might do. It's just a matter of letting that child speak and be seen for who they are. And then the critical thing is that they then start to feel like they're loved unconditionally. If the child starts to have that sense that they're being loved unconditionally, that just is so freeing for them and allows them to be themselves and to, as you said, have a fresh start. Okay, how can I act different tomorrow? and move forward tomorrow, to make a different choice tomorrow. Those questions then can start to come up. So, but it's just so important that that parent be love based when they do that.
Let's explore those two concepts because I think a lot of listeners are going to need clarity on love based and fearful parenting. So that we understand, of course, we're going to be afraid of our kid making stupid decisions, risky choices, mistakes that are costly. That's the thing, is that these kids, they're making a kid-sized decision-making process with adult-sized issue and lifelong consequences. Of course, I'm fearful. So now tell me how that's affecting my parenting. What is fearful parenting in your mind?
There's a couple of different ways. I always like to talk to parents to kind of be super aware of what they're experiencing. That gives them a signal for where they are. And if they're experiencing frustration or disappointment or anger, or in this case, it's like a fearful. It's just you're worried. Worry and angst or anxiety is an example of being in a fearful place. And we're going to experience that, and we're going to have moments where that's there. Part of what I like to point to, though, is that when you engage from that place, it tends not to move things forward. Whatever you say tends to damage relationship. And again, it's disempowering. The child does not, because you're going to, the classic example is the child getting in the car and heading out on Saturday night, for Saturday night with their buddies. It's like, you're worried. And so the response is, well, drive slow, you start dictating a bunch of stuff to them, and it's just not very effective when you do that. And we've all been there, right?
My mom, God bless her heart, I'm 50 years old, and she'll call me from the bottom of my hill in Colorado and be like, "There's deer on the road. Be careful.
Be careful." Right?
It's like, Mom, I'm 50.
Yeah.
But again, this is speaking to the love we have with our kids. And what's so important, what you're bringing up, I heard a psychiatrist teaching my family about this a few months back, the worried face. Your kid, if you've got a worried face and you're talking to your kid when they're going to leave on Friday night and you're talking with the worried face, they've already tuned you out.
Right. It doesn't matter what you say. They feel it. It's more, and actually, when I talk about building connection, I use the term be. You have to be a certain way. It doesn't really matter what you say. It's how you are being in that moment. And part of building connection when you're being love-based is you come into the conversation with compassion, with forgiveness, with curiosity, those kinds of contexts, and it just creates a space for the relationship to grow and develop. And so, it's how you are engaging in that circumstance. And part of it, it's interesting because when you're fearful, the underlying message is that you don't trust the teen. You don't believe that they're capable, and that's why you're fearful. I mean, if you truly trusted them and if you believed that they were capable of making good choices through the night, you would experience a lot less fear. And so that's where it's disempowering. The teen knows that. I mean, that's why you're feeling it, and they pick up on that fact. Whereas if I am very comfortable and I'm able to send them off with them knowing that I am, there, and I trust them and I believe in their ability, it's just more empowering to them. I'm communicating that belief to them that they can take that with them as they go out, if that makes sense.
Jim, how did you get into all of this? Where did all this start for you, becoming a coach?
So a long time ago, which we haven't mentioned yet, my family, we have 6 children, and my youngest is actually in college, but I have older children. We have grandchildren. We have 13 grandchildren now. So family parenting has always been a big part of my life, but it really took off about 20 years ago. It's more of a passion around personal development. A lot of it started with personal development. And actually, I like to share with parents that parenting is a great personal development program for you. It's a chance for the parent to grow and learn and become a better person as part of that process. So a lot of
the best seminar you'll ever go to.
Right, exactly. It's real life training. And if you think about it too, part of how our kids learn is by watching us. A lot of what they pick up is just through our example and what we model for them. And so, having a growth mindset and really trying to be a better person is a gift that you can give to your child then. But So I had a lot of interest in personal development. I started writing a lot of reflection, but in the beginning, it was just really around my family and my kids and what was going on within our family. But then it's evolved. And I mentioned my youngest is now off in college. I'm in a different place in my life, and I just feel called to share some of the wisdom that I've gained over the last 40 some years of being married. My wife and I've been married for 41 years now. So it's a calling that's come here late. It's sort of the last stage of my life, if you will. I tell people I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And it's very purposeful work to be able to share and try to serve and help other parents, as they go through their parenting journey as well.
Hey, folks, I want to share with you a product I've been trying out lately. It's called Magic Mind. It's a natural nootropic drink that helps with focus. I've been trying it alongside my morning coffee. It has cut down on my caffeine consumption, and I really do stay more focused and get a lot more done during the day. So if you're looking for a new drink to try out, I would recommend it. It's extremely healthy. It's filled with all the kinds of stuff you want, you and your kids. It's also available at Sprouts. Check it out. Get it on Amazon. It's an amazing product. And big thanks to Magic Mind for being our first sponsor. Off the air, you and I expressed an absolute love for something we're both keenly interested in, and that's Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. You had mentioned that you coach using that essentially as a template. And you said, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. And I responded, literally our entire program at the treatment center was based on the hero's journey. And I taught it in English class for a good 15 years. I love the hero's journey. And I'm very, very keen to hear your take on it and how you use it as a model, as a template for working with families.
And it'd be interesting. I'd love to hear your background. I've heard it as the hero's two journeys. That's the way the story structure was explained to me. And the premise is that the hero is on two different journeys. Obviously, the first one is known as the journey of accomplishment. It's that goal or task. We have all these things that we're trying to accomplish. And while, in a story, that makes for an entertaining story, it's not what makes the hero or the story compelling. What makes the story compelling is the second journey, which is the journey of fulfillment, which is the premise of the hero learning new principles, values, and beliefs that just make their life work better. And part of the insight for me was when I look at my life journey, I see those two journeys playing out. I mean, as you can imagine, father of six, there was a lot of tasks, a lot of goals, a lot of stuff to do. I mean, sometimes I say we were six kids busy, all the time. But all the while I was doing all of that stuff that a husband and a father of six does, I was also experiencing this internal transformation. It's discovering the principles, values, and beliefs that just make our life and our family work better. So that was part of the process. And what's interesting as I've dove deeper into it, it really, that journey of fulfillment, the stuff that goes on inside, it needs to be the priority. That's my message to parents, is that it needs to be the first priority. And that journey is really about choosing love over fear. That's really the essence of that internal journey that we're on. And if you can get that right, the outside stuff tends to take care of itself. All the other goals and things that you want to accomplish. So it's partly for us as parents to be aware of that, but then also when we coach and engage with our children, to coach them from that perspective as well, those two journeys. How do I coach my child along their journey of fulfillment, or how do I have them, part of my process is to help them be more love-based. And then we talk about outside goals and tasks as well. So it's having a focus on both of those journeys, with the priority being that inside journey. How can this particular circumstance help my child grow and develop along that internal journey that they're on, and make them a better person, deepen or ingrain, love-based values and beliefs. How do we use that?
Let's talk about the love-based values and beliefs, as you have brought up a few times, as the opposition to the fearful mindset, loving mindset, the loving parenting strategies, the values and beliefs. What's involved in this? It's more than just I love you and unconditional love. There's a value system that's getting created here.
Yeah, and like, for example, one of the values would be abundance, viewing the life from the position of abundance as opposed to scarcity. When we're fearful, we tend to see the world through the lens of scarcity. But that's a lot different than viewing it from an abundant mindset. Another one of the fundamental beliefs is the idea, it's a great question. Are people fundamentally good, or are they fundamentally bad? And from a love-based mindset, I view the world and people from the perspective that people are fundamentally good, which makes it easier to have compassion and forgiveness for them, which is part of that loving mindset. So it's those kinds of values and beliefs that you start to take on when you adopt that love-based mindset. It's, compassion, forgiveness become a priority, seeing the best in people, abundance and curiosity. I mean, all of these types of, and seeing people for who they are and being unconditional would be another example of the kinds of values that are there when you view it from a love-based mindset.
What's the strategy for a parent who's coming at your work late in the game? The kid's already stolen the car, run away, has been to treatment once, it didn't stick. Now the kid's starting to use again. And the parent's like, abundance mindset. Jim, what are you talking about? Like I'm going broke on this kid mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. Like this kid is breaking my bank. How does a latecomer show up to this love mindset?
You got to start where you are. I think that's a big part of it. And part of the shift in mindset is, and this may sound a little bit odd, but you are exactly where you are supposed to be. And that's part of a love-based mindset. And whatever's happened up until now, it's been part of your journey. And the question is, okay, what have I learned from this? And then how can I use that to take one step forward? And I think that's, where I would encourage those people to be is, where are you at, and what would be one step forward? How could you view this situation a little bit differently and maybe have, 2% forgiveness where you had zero before? And, that's the step forward. And then if you can do that, then tomorrow it's one more step forward. So you do have to take it. And that's why I love the idea of a journey, because you're never going to get there. I mean, you're going to be going through this process for the rest of your life and learning and growing and developing. And so it's a matter of, okay, let's take one step at a time and just see if we can move forward. And then the other piece of it is you're going to have setbacks, right? With the relationship with the child, maybe you have a 2 or 3 week period where things kind of move forward and it feels like it's in a better place, but then something's going to happen that may feel like 2 steps backwards. But it's just part of the journey, and just trying to maintain that mindset of, okay, how do I grow and learn from this? What's the lesson here for me? What's the lesson for the child? And what would be the next step forward for me to take in order to move forward?
It's interesting. Parents forget that they are always have access to both mindsets. Anytime a parent calls, they're calling because there's a problem. They're not, hey, Jim, I'm looking to hire a coach because things are awesome. Like that's not when they call. They call when the poop has hit the fan and has spread all over the place. The flies have shown up and laid eggs. Like that's when they call. And on that first call, you get the massive download of everything that's gone wrong. And then inevitably the parent says, they really are a good kid. They're so smart and they're so beautiful, handsome. They're just an amazing child. And I'm so sad. So the love is always there. And so that's what I hear you saying, Jim. It's like, is to start where you are. Yeah, you're dealing with the poop smeared on the walls and you still love them. Of course you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, just in one of the benefits, and this, of coaching, is a chance for them, the parent, to be seen for what they're going through. And it's a chance to acknowledge and validate what they're experiencing, let them share. And it's interesting because I always talk to parents about, you aren't in a position to coach or try to empower your child if that child is overwhelmed. If they're overwhelmed with fear or anxiety or frustration, they aren't in a position to look for solutions. So your first priority is to allow them to regain their composure. How do you serve them and allow them to regain composure? Then you move to solutions. Well, the same thing's true with the parent. If the parent is overwhelmed with this fear and frustration and anxiety, they need a chance to regain composure first And then once they're there, then we can start talking about solutions. But a lot of times you try to move to solutions too quick, and you just aren't in a position, you aren't in a mindset to be able to really be creative about, okay, what is that next step, or what is the next thing we can do to try to move things forward. So regaining that composure is valuable, and that's one of the benefits of coaching.
Jim, on your website, which we're going to give people instructions to in a minute, you've got a free gift for everybody about conversation stoppers, conversation starters. That, the worst thing you could just say, it's going to kill the conversation, it's going to end it. Just don't say it, parents. Can you give us two of them here on the show? Can we talk about two of the stoppers and two of the starters?
Yeah, it's kind of a mindset thing as well. And just the overriding premise is those, a lot of times parents will ask questions. I like to call it, they're results oriented. They're asking the teen about something specific that they've either done or not done. And the problem is, a lot of times the teen feels like they're being exposed or judged as either being good or bad when you do that. And so that's what shuts them down. So if you ask, did you do your homework? The teens feels that like an attack. And it's like you're passing judgment and you don't trust them. And it's disengaging to them. And it's more of a results type of a question. So that's the basic theme of the ones that are the conversation killers, as opposed to the ones that open the teens up and engage them are more process oriented. Let's say they took a math test and you ask them, what did you think? Was the test a fair test? That allows them to share some of their thoughts about, how was it, what was good about it, what was not good about it. It gives them a chance to share who they are and what they believe, and they love doing that. And so it's asking those curiosity questions about, more process oriented questions as opposed to the results ones. And so that's the essence of the resource. It's, I position it as 10 questions you should never ask your teenager, but they're all ones that are, it's kind of results oriented and questioning. It's like, what time did you get home last night? It feels like an attack when you ask that to them. And of course, you're going to get the one word answer. I don't know. They're just
Yeah,
going to, you don't get much
10
engagement. Right.
something.
Exactly. And so it's, if we ask those better questions, the ones that allow the teen to, like I talk a lot to parents about social media, and they get concerned about appropriate or inappropriate post. And so I always say, we always ask the teen, say, tell you what, I'd love to see, scroll through your feed, see if you can come up with a post. What do you think is inappropriate? Ask the teen to share something like that with you, and it allows them to share their opinion about what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. And so that gives you insight, and it builds that relationship through that process when you do that.
Why is it so hard as parents? You're a parent, I'm a parent, parents are listening. Why does it get so hard for us to remember to ask questions and then just shut up? Why are we so afraid to do that as parents?
We ask the results questions because we're worried. A lot of times that's fearful. We want to see if they're doing what they're supposed to do, as opposed to really trying to engage from a curiosity mindset. And when I say curious, it's about allowing them to sort of blossom as to who they are, trying to discover who they are as a person, what are their values or beliefs. And part of the fear is that sometimes we fear that they may believe something or have a view that we don't agree with. And that's always a place of conflict. And that's what you got to be careful of, is then that you've challenged that, it creates a little bit of a disconnect there with the teen. So the teen has to have some space to express what they thought or what they think about a particular topic without you judging it. But at the same time, you should be able to share your value. And, so they say something you disagree with, it's, oh, that's an interesting perspective. I never thought of it that way. Can I share what I think? And then your parent shares, and then you have a discussion. It's not like you telling them, oh, no, you're wrong, which is what we tend to do because we want to sort of demand that they believe what we believe. But they have to go through the process of discovering it for themselves. I've seen this come up a lot when a parent will say, well, my son or daughter, they have a boyfriend or girlfriend that I don't like and it's bad for them. So the parent wants to make the child break off the relationship, which part of what I would throw out is, well, the real value here is for them to discover that the relationship is not bad for them, and for them to to be able to learn from that process and break it off themselves. And so it's how do we coach them through that process rather than making them do something? And again, it goes back to that control versus empowerment question again. So, yeah, I think it's hard because, again, it's that control. We want to control what they're doing, and we struggle letting go of some of that. And part of it's because we're afraid they're not going to do it the way we want them to do it.
Jim, how can parents not only follow up with you, but get their hands on your free resource here?
So my practice is called FamilyEnrichmentAcademy.com. So you can just go to the FamilyEnrichmentAcademy.com, and right there on the homepage, if you scroll to the bottom, there's the where you can download that resource of those 10 questions you should never ask your teen, and the 10 free questions as well. There's an about page and a contact page there, and they can get the email address and reach out. We'd love to have a chance to chat with them.
What came up for me listening to Jim was a simple phrase, and it's, God, I did it, I'm copping to this one. And look, I know at least one of my kids is going to hear this podcast, so I'm copping to this one. We tell them that they're wrong because we want them to be all right. We think as parents that making sure that our kids are going to be all right requires us to tell them when they're wrong. And it's hard to trust a kid. It's hard to trust a child. And it's hard to trust a teen who's been making risky decisions. My kids are doing great, despite risky decisions. They're doing great. And I'm desperately proud of both of them. And as many questions as I did ask, as many amazing, powerful conversations as we did have, we could have had more. A woman who worked for my wife and I, Sherry Simmons, a brilliant therapist. She was our executive director of our program. She did exactly what Jim was talking about, where at night after dinner, they would get their phones and they would scroll or pull up something that they saved to show. And they had a social media show and tell every day after dinner. And it was the insight that they both needed to each other's lives. What they found funny, what they found offensive, what they found risque, what they found interesting, what they found that they couldn't tell whether it was real or not. And it was a conversation. Conversations are hard when we're scared. So, as always, parents, this is where we end the show by saying, you take care of yourself first, your adult relationship second, and your children third. So we're not so scared when we're talking to our children. We remember how to ask questions and then be quiet and really listen to the answers. But to do that, we have to be in that loving parenting space that Jim was talking about. So huge thanks to Jim White. Make sure that you do visit him at FamilyEnrichmentAcademy.com. Get his free download. Thanks to Deepen Productions for producing the show, making it sound so good. Parents, teachers, and clinicians who joined me on this episode, I'll see you next week on Beyond Risk and Back.